Auven.
On August 15, 2021, inside Kabul, Afghanistan, a city built behind blast walls begins to empty. At the presidential palace, the last plans are no longer about governing, they are about leaving. Outside the capital, Taliban fighters are already close enough to wait. Kabul does not fall in a single moment. It falls through a chain of decisions, withdrawals, negotiations, and quiet collapses that began long before the first Taliban fighter reached the edge of the city. This is how it unfolded. For almost 20 years, Afghanistan had been held together by a strange arrangement. There was an Afghan government in Kabul. There was an Afghan army on paper. There were police stations, ministries, governors, courts, aid programs, intelligence networks, and uniforms. But underneath all of it was a machine that depended on foreign money, foreign aircraft, foreign contractors, and foreign confidence. The system looked Afghan from the outside. It was not fully Afghan from the inside. The war began in October 2001, after the September 11th attacks. The Taliban government was removed quickly. Then came the much harder part, building a new state in a country where power had never really moved cleanly through ministries and elections. It moved through tribes, commanders, patronage, deals, fear, and survival. For years, the United States and its allies trained Afghan forces to fight like a modern military. They built units that needed air support, logistics, maintenance, intelligence, salaries, fuel, spare parts, and contractors. Helicopters needed mechanics. Bases needed supply lines. Commanders needed confidence that help would arrive when the pressure came. That confidence became one of the most important weapons in the country. Then, on February 29, 2020, the United States and the Taliban signed an agreement in Doha. The Afghan government was not a formal party to the deal. The Taliban had spent years saying the real power was not in Kabul, it was Washington. In Doha, that argument became harder to dismiss. The deal set a path for foreign troops to leave Afghanistan. The Taliban agreed to certain counterterrorism commitments and to enter talks with other Afghans. But on the battlefield, something else was happening. The Taliban could now tell local commanders, police chiefs, elders, and governors that the Americans were leaving. The question was no longer whether Kabul had international support. The question was how long that support would still matter. On April 14, 2021, President Joe Biden announced that U.S. troops would begin leaving on May 1st and finish by September 11th. The date was symbolic. 20 years after the attacks that started the war, America's longest war would end. In Kabul, officials had heard withdrawal talk before. American presidents had spoken about leaving. Deadlines had shifted. Troop levels had risen and fallen. Promises had been revised. For many inside the Afghan government, the safest assumption was that something would change again. Maybe the deadline would move. Maybe contractors would stay. Maybe air support would continue. Maybe the final exit would never really be final. This belief mattered. A government can survive bad news if it prepares for it. It can survive a lost province if the center holds. It can survive a withdrawal if the army believes the state still has a future. But if everyone suspects that everyone else is preparing to cut a deal, then the map changes faster than the front line. In May 2021, Taliban fighters launched major offensives in Helmand and other provinces. Districts began to fall. Some were taken after fighting. Others changed hands through negotiation. In rural Afghanistan, the Taliban did not always need to storm a position. Sometimes they only needed to surround it, contact local elders, and offer the men inside a choice. Keep fighting for a government that may not survive the month, or surrender, keep your life, and go home. This was not just a military collapse, it was a psychological one. By June, the fighting had spread across much of the country. The Taliban pushed into the north, far from their traditional southern strongholds. This was important. Northern Afghanistan had been the base of anti-Taliban resistance in the 1990s. If the north held, Kabul had depth. If the north broke, Kabul was not just threatened, it was isolated. On July 2nd, U.S. forces left Bagram Air Base. For nearly 20 years, Bagram had been the central symbol of American military power in Afghanistan. It was more than a runway. It was a city of hangars, detention facilities, fuel depots, command rooms, blast walls, and aircraft. When it was handed over, the message was unmistakable. The war was no longer being managed from Bagram. The center of gravity moved to Kabul. But Kabul was not ready to become the last piece on the board. The Afghan government was highly centralized. Provincial officials often waited for decisions from the capital. Commanders depended on approval, money, ammunition, and political protection from above. President Ashraf Ghani governed through a narrow circle of trusted people, which made the system more controllable in theory and more brittle in a crisis. When the crisis came, the state did not bend, it cracked. On August 6th, Zaranj fell. It was the first provincial capital taken by the Taliban in years. Zaranj sits in the southwest, near the border with Iran. It was not the largest prize, but it was the first door. Once it opened, others followed. The Taliban began taking provincial capitals at a pace that shocked foreign governments and Afghan officials alike. Kunduz fell in the north, then more cities followed. Every fall created pressure on the next one. Every surrender made another surrender seem rational. Every rumor of a deal became more believable. This is how a map collapses. Not all at once, then suddenly everywhere. On August 12th and 13th, the losses became catastrophic. Herat, one of Afghanistan's most important western cities, was overrun. Kandahar, the country's second largest city, and the Taliban's spiritual birthplace, fell as well. In the north, Mazar-e-Sharif became the key. If Mazar held, there was still a chance of a northern resistance line. If it fell, Kabul would be exposed. On August 14th, Mazar-e-Sharif fell. The road to Kabul was now open from almost every direction. Inside the capital, foreign embassies began destroying sensitive documents. Helicopters moved between the U.S. Embassy compound and the airport. Afghans who had worked with foreign governments rushed toward visa offices, gates, and routers. Some had paperwork, some had emails, some had nothing but screenshots on their phones. The airport became the last exit. On the morning of August 15th, the Taliban took Jalalabad without a major fight. This mattered because Jalalabad controlled the road east toward Pakistan. Kabul was now effectively surrounded. The Afghan government still had soldiers. It still had ministries. It still had a flag. But the state had lost the thing that mattered most. People no longer believed it would be there tomorrow. Taliban forces reached the outskirts of Kabul. Their leaders said they did not want to take the city by force. Talks began over a possible transfer of power. Inside Kabul, the fear was immediate. Shops closed, streets jammed, banks filled with people trying to withdraw cash. Government workers left their offices. Police posts were abandoned. Armed men changed clothes. Then President Ashraf Ghani left the country. His departure removed the final visible center of the republic. Later, Ghani said he left to avoid bloodshed in the capital. Many Afghans saw something else. They saw the president leave while they were still trapped inside the city. By evening, Taliban fighters entered Kabul. Some moved into police stations. Some reached the presidential palace. Images showed armed men standing in rooms where Afghan officials had worked only hours earlier. The Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, built with 2 decades of international support, had collapsed in a day. But the fall of Kabul was not the end of the operation. It was the beginning of the evacuation. At Hamid Karzai International Airport, thousands of people gathered outside the gates. The airport was now an island. The Taliban controlled the city around it. Foreign soldiers controlled parts of the airport inside it. Between them were crowds of Afghans trying to get through a narrow set of entrances where paperwork, desperation, and fear collided. The scenes became some of the most recognizable images of the entire war. People running beside aircraft, families lifting children toward soldiers, crowds pressed against concrete barriers, Taliban fighters outside the perimeter. American, British, and Allied troops trying to process names in a crush of noise, heat, dust, sewage water, gunfire, and panic. Some people got through, many did not. The evacuation was massive. More than 120,000 people were flown out in the final weeks. But the number also hides the sorting mechanism behind it. A person needed the right gate, the right document, the right contact, the right message, the right timing, and the ability to physically reach the entrance. A former interpreter could be 200 feet from salvation and still never reach the soldier holding the list. On August 26th, the danger became real in the worst possible way. At Abbey Gate, one of the main entrances to the airport, a suicide bomber from ISIS-K attacked a packed crowd. 13 U.S. service members were killed. Around 170 Afghan civilians were killed. Dozens more were wounded. The blast tore through people who had come to the gate because they believed it was the way out. After the attack, the evacuation continued. There was no better option. The deadline was still approaching. The Taliban were still outside the airport. ISIS-K was still a threat. Every hour mattered. Every flight mattered. Every seat mattered. On August 30th, 2021, the last U.S. military aircraft left Kabul. The final image was simple. A soldier walking into the belly of a C-17. A green night vision frame. An empty runway behind him. Then the airport lights belonged to someone else. The Taliban declared victory. The United States said the war was over. The Afghan Republic was gone. Foreign embassies moved their Afghanistan operations elsewhere. Millions of Afghans woke up in a country whose government, laws, symbols, and future had changed almost overnight. But the fall of Kabul was never only about one city. It was about what happens when a state is built faster than its foundations. It was about an army, trained to depend on systems that disappeared. It was about a government that many citizens feared, needed, distrusted, and served at the same time. It was about a superpower trying to leave a war without admitting how much of the country still depended on its staying. The strangest part is that almost every major actor could see some piece of the collapse coming. The Taliban saw it in the districts. Afghan commanders saw it in the supply lines. Civilians saw it in the bank queues. Foreign diplomats saw it in the evacuation plans. But almost no one saw the whole machine fail at once. That is why the final days still feel impossible. A capital can have walls, checkpoints, ministries, armored vehicles, intelligence reports, and international backing. It can have a president, a flag, an army, and a seat at the United Nations. But if enough people decide the future has already moved elsewhere, the fall can begin before the first fighter arrives. And somewhere in Kabul, beyond the airport road, beyond the palace rooms, beyond the abandoned checkpoints, there are still people who made it to the gate and people who did not. The map changed in August 2021. The question is, who was left outside it?